appreciate it. How long are you waiting for this? Can we stand for the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? I have a motion to approve the agenda. A second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Approved.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out this evening to our budget meeting and community forum. This evening, we decided to try something a little bit different in an attempt to have more participation and receive some more feedback than we have at our previous budget meetings, and obviously, that's worked this evening, so thank you so much for coming out. Tonight's presentation, what you're going to see is the presentation divided up into three parts. Initially, we're going to give you some background information in terms of our revenues and expenditures, give you a little historical perspective, and set in place the conditions that we're under in terms of moving from 11-12 to 12-13 budget. The second part of the presentation, and after each part of the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to talk at your table, and then we'll report out with a few tables and get some feedback from each of the tables. If you notice on the tables, there are 3 different colored sheets of paper. You'll be utilizing those in each one of the sessions. We'd like to take those with us at the end of the session, so we'll have feedback from every table. We'll record that feedback. We'll be putting that up on our website. We'll be using that for future meetings. The second part of the presentation is going to focus in on those expenditure reductions that we're going through at this particular point in time to reduce the budget gap moving into the 2012-13 school district budget. We'll ask for some feedback after that section, and then the third section is explaining the tax levy limit. That is new legislation that is in effect for the 12-13 school year. It impacts the vote, and it impacts our budget for next year. So we're going to be reviewing that, and then again asking for some further discussion at the table and then feedback. So you'll have an opportunity after each one of the sessions to talk at your table. And then we'll get some feedback, not from every table, but from about 5 tables as we go through this. And we'll be recording some information up here as well. And then, as I said, we will collect your information at the table so that we'll have specific information coming back to us.
If people don't hear, make sure you let us know. We want everyone to be able to know that they're hearing what we're speaking about.
And during our feedback sessions, we do have microphones that will go around so people can hear what's being said from the tables. So again, looking at the challenges, participating in the challenges and understanding how we're going to go through the development of the 2012-13 budget. Give you an update on the process and where we are so far, and then an opportunity to receive comments and feedbacks. So I think if you've been keeping up with articles in the paper, I don't think there is any district that would doubt that this is the most difficult budget in recent history or in the history of school districts putting budgets forth to the public. There is no question moving into the 2012-13 budget that the number of issues that are hitting school districts at once are significant, and they're impacting not only the end result, but the budget processes as well, and how we're going through that process. The other part is that there is no end in sight for the factors that are stressing the budget. So while we're looking at 2012-13, we're also looking to plan ahead for 2013-14. We don't see those issues going away for us. They're going to continue. As a matter of fact, some will increase, perhaps significantly, in terms of expenditure requirements for districts. We know that we have to enact some staff reductions. There's no questions. We have a $3.5 million rollover budget gap. There's no question that some staff reductions have to be taken into consideration. There isn't a way to avoid this. And again, planning for beyond 2012-13, we need to control the cycle. We need to look beyond this year, although it will be hard to. We need to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for failure in 2013-14. The issues that really came forward this year in terms of setting us up for the 2012-13 budget is, number one, the last of the federal stimulus money, Federal Jobs Act, expires this year. And if you recall, 3 years ago, President Obama put in place the ARRA funding, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. That was stimulus funding for a 2-year period of time. The third year was jobs funding. In Hamburg's case, and in most districts' case, you were required, or you did put that money into staffing. So what you see there is approximately $1.2 million in jobs fund money that is available this year that won't be available next year. You'll see a slide later on in the presentation that shows you the state aid take-back from New York State over the last several years. I believe we have approximately 7 years. So although we are receiving a small increase in state aid moving into 2012-13, it certainly doesn't come close to making up for the aid that's been lost over the course of several years. The other part to consider, we haven't seen this yet, but federal and state money coming to Hamburg is based on school poverty, and it looks like the formula may be driven to be based more on school poverty. So one of our concerns in the future is that we may continue to receive an even smaller share from state and federal payments based on our poverty status as compared to other districts. And again, considering 3 sources of revenue, state aid, sales tax, and property tax, that's the revenue, that's the funding that we have to deal with. There are no other real funds of substance that we can contain in the budget. I'm going to have Barb Spores, our Director of Administrative Services, review the financial aspect of this. Barb will take us up to the first feedback session. I'll take it and explain what we'd like you to do at that point. So, Barb?
Thank you, everybody. I want to talk a little bit about revenue. There's three parts to building a budget: your revenue budget, your expenditure or your appropriations budget, and your fund balance. And those 3 sections really are what you build your budget with. So I'm going to start first by talking about revenue. As the superintendent indicated, you can see that we've lost considerable federal education jobs fund money going into next year. That's a lot of money to try to make up for. It's unfortunate. We all knew that there was a sunset on this money, so no one's been taken by surprise, but unfortunately we're all hoping that there would be some other type of offset. Years past, when one thing went away, something else always sort of came magically to help you out in the end. It doesn't appear to be the case anymore, so we're going to have to learn to deal with the lack of this money. Our state aid has increased a little bit. That is because we have more what's called reimbursement aid. Our foundation aid is the base aid. Think about the foundation of your house. It is the base aid that you take and you pay most of your general fund bills from. Other aid is reimbursement aid. It's based on what you expend. So what you expended last year, you get this year in the way of reimbursement. So basically, what this means is our reimbursement aids are up in certain categories just because we expended a little more in certain high-cost areas. A lot of it has to do with mandated special education services that we provide. So that is up a little bit. Sales tax, we are projecting to be up in 12-13 by about $50,000. Even though the economy is still not doing particularly well, people seem to be spending more money. So we are receiving a little bit more in sales tax this year. So we're projecting next year for it to go up a little bit. Other is basically a lot of other miscellaneous items. Maybe at one time they were bigger items, but right now they don't amount to a lot of money. There's things like interest. You think we could make a lot of money on our money, but at one point everybody did it. That really doesn't work anymore. So interest is way down, just like in your own checking or savings account, it's pretty negligible. We do charge fees for certain things, certain activities, insurance recoveries, certain expenses that we get back from BOCEs, things like that. They all sort of fall to the other category, and it is expected to go down a little bit next year. Other tax items are things like pilots, payments in lieu of tax, which basically are certain businesses that don't pay real property tax. They pay a payment that's been set up through ECIDA. And then we have designated fund balance. Designated fund balance is what we use to offset the real property tax levy. It's basically at the end of the school year, what you haven't expended in your appropriations budget and what you took in as a revenue. The difference is your fund balance. And we always take a part of that, as most school districts do, and appropriate that to offset the real property tax levy. It's kind of a revenue in and of itself. For 12-13, because of the way certain things are falling during this school year, it doesn't seem like we'll have as much money to designate towards the real property tax levy. So that is a decrease in revenue in the overall picture. In federal aid, that hasn't really changed too much. That's Medicaid money, which actually is probably budgeted very generously. Our expenditure challenges, I have 2 slides on my paper, so sorry. Our biggest expenditure challenges are going to be the retirement contributions that we're required to make for both our employees and our teachers. There's 2 separate retirement systems. Those numbers are allocated to us. It's just basic math. You take your total payroll times whatever your retirement contribution rate is, and that's what you pay. There's really nothing to negotiate. There's nothing you can do about it. Right now, the current percentage increases in the district for our contribution are the largest in 30 years. They're just huge. It's a very big expense for us. Another large expense that we do try to control, but it's very difficult to do so, is our healthcare costs. Healthcare always goes up, but we are in the Erie One BOCES Trust. We do receive good rates, and everybody seems to be happy, as far as I know, with the coverage. So it is a good choice. We do monitor it, because health insurance changes where you should be with your health insurance. It does change. You can't stay with something forever without looking at other options. But we are saving money being in this plan, but yet it's still expensive, and there's still costs that are going to be going up next year.
Barb, are you going to tell us what those increase in percentages are at some later point, or can you give a sense of what the retirement system increases and those increases at this point?
Sure, I can certainly tell you. The teachers' increase is around 12%, and the employees' retirement increase is 18%. We don't have numbers from the trust yet regarding the actual increase, but we're budgeting for an 8.5% increase. It's usually somewhere, between 8 and 10% when you take the combination of the increase between family and single. So 8.5 is what we're budgeting. We're hoping that we're over budgeting, and we might be able to reduce that number.
Thank you.
Sure. These are the actual numbers. You can see the increase that we're projecting in teachers' retirement, employees' retirement, healthcare. Those are things I just spoke to. The next 3 sections are non-instructional salaries, our instructional salaries, and our administrative salaries. These are our contracted salaries, so if everything were to remain consistent and everybody received their pay raise for their contract, these would be the increases that we would be looking at for next year. It's an estimate, it's not exact, but we are looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a $1.8 million increase just in these fixed costs. So you can see this coupled with the loss of revenue, you're already starting out, behind the 8 ball, so to speak. So that's why it is such a challenge this year. The expenditures, adding the increases in expenditures along with our decreased revenue that we're anticipating. Our starting budget gap, when we first started to look at the budget, based on what we knew was over $3.5 million. And we're working diligently as we get more and more information on what exactly our state aid is, and what exactly some of our costs are going to be regarding payroll to bridge that gap. And the superintendent is going to speak to that further on in our presentation this evening. But it was very large. It's a huge obstacle to try to overcome. What we do know is that a 1% levy increase based on what our levy is this year provides us with $304,746. I don't want to say that's not a lot of money, but when you think about it, you would somehow think that number would be higher.
Can you tell us other terms for levy when you say levy increase?
Sure. The tax levy, basically, it's complicated because people do misuse the term, but once you understand it, it's really very simple. You take your appropriations budget or your expenditure budget, and that's basically just all of your expenses for the year that you are projecting. And a budget is a projection, because you, of course, don't want to spend every last penny, just like when you have your budget at home, you're hoping that there's a little bit more left at the end of the day than you budgeted for. So you take all of your budget, then you take all of your projected revenues, and the difference that you're short, because everyone's always short, is what you're going to call your real property tax levy. It is the difference between your expenditures and your revenues. And then your real property tax levy is the total amount that all of the taxpayers of the district are going to split up and pay. Now, the way it's paid is a little different depending upon what town you're in, because the way a school district is different than a town is when you live in a town, everybody lives in the town. You all pay town tax. Maybe you even get to pay village tax if you're super lucky. But in a school district, we have lots of towns within a district. All the towns are assessed a little differently, so what you actually end up paying on your bill might be different, and the tax rate may look different than what your neighbor pays in the next town over. But basically, everybody pays their prorated share of the levy. So it's just the total amount spread across all of the townships within the school district. It's not the same as the tax rate. You read in the paper, they do this all the time. They'll call it the tax levy, they'll call it the tax rate. The tax rate is the actual amount of money per $1,000 it's going to cost you. So if your tax rate per $1,000 is $10, you pay $10 for every $1,000 of the value of your home, which is not the same as the tax levy, which is the amount of money that we spread over all of the townships within the district. And now that you know the definition, when you read the paper, you will see that they interchange these terms, and it becomes very confusing to people, but that is really the difference. There's a huge difference between the two. In order to meet our expenditures on a rollover budget, and what we're calling a rollover budget is if we just take all of our expenses this year and meet all of our contractual obligations for contracts, taking into account increases for health insurance, retirement, utilities, all of those things, then that would be our budget for 12-13. That's really a rollover budget. That means nothing has been taken out, nothing's really changed. We're just paying more next year because it costs more to do business next year than it did to do business this year. It's just like at home. So if we have a rollover budget based on the revenues that we were projecting when we started this process, the levy would go up 12.84%. So that means the amount of money that was spread over all of the townships within the district would be almost 13% greater in 12-13 than was in this current fiscal year. Now, that doesn't mean your bill goes up 13%. That just means that's the amount of money we're short. This is just a little history. You can see for the past several years, dating back as far as 06-07, this slide outlines our budget, our tax levy, our state aid, and the other revenue that we just kind of, to keep it an easier slide to read, we just put all the other revenue under other. So you can see that starting in 0607, our budget was incrementally going up, which makes sense because expenses go up every year, and our contracts that we have to pay all the folks who work here, usually goes up every year a little bit. The same was following true with the levy. It was incrementally increasing, as was state aid. But then you can see that changed. State aid began to decline in 2009-10. However, our levy continued to go up, as did our budget for the most part. And that's when, that was right after we all were receiving bad news regarding the state of the state, and that our revenue from the state was now no longer going to be flowing in the manner that we had anticipated, that there was this big budget deficit in the state, and there was going to be this, what they call the gap elimination adjustment, where all of the school districts in the state now were going to not only receive the same amount of money they had for the past 3 years, but then they were going to do this little take back at the end, and to actually take back a pretty sizable chunk of that money. This year, they took back about $4 million, and projected in 12-13 it is a little less, but it's still well over $3 million. So with all those pieces, I'm hoping that you'll begin to be able to see why we're in this position. We're not the only district. Almost every district is in this position to some extent. Some districts do have more fund balance than us to utilize as a revenue, and that's why they've managed to maintain their certain level of staffing. You're going to see that really be different after this year. If they had any fund balance left to use as a revenue, it's going to pretty much be gone. And if they're not laying off large numbers of people this year, you're going to see it happen next year for them. So we do have certain strategies to close the budget gap. We know that it's not reasonable to go out and ask the taxpayer to hold an almost 13% levy increase. We're all taxpayers too. We don't want to see a 13% levy increase when we get our school bill either. It's just unfair. There's a lot of tax fatigue in the region, so we're very mindful of that. But that is what the number would have been. We do know that our expenditure projections may change due to certain factors. We're hopeful that more state aid is going to come our way. I know everybody's heard about this to some extent. It's not really been completely worked out, although it does look rather promising that we may very well receive about a 1% additional amount of state aid, which in our case would maybe be about $125,000. It's a lot of money, but relative to a $56 million budget, it's not a lot of money. It's certainly better than having them take it away. But at this point, that looks like if it does come, that's probably about all it will be. We're hopeful that our healthcare numbers were budgeted high, and we're going to know within the next 2 weeks or so exactly what the increase is, so hopefully we'll see some money in the budget there. And then we, of course, are currently in contract negotiations, and we're hopeful that we may be able to limit the cost of salary and certain retirement increases. As we've been speaking about, and basically the 3 strategies you have are to monitor and limit your expenditures, increase your tax levy, or utilize fund balance. I did get a bit ahead of myself explaining that Hamburg does not have a lot of fund balance. We've used it in the past. Fund balance has to be created every year. As I said, fund balance really, it's not a magical thing. I know people have a hard time understanding what it is, but all fund balance is that you don't expend all of your budget and you get more revenue than you thought you were, and that's the difference. Like at home, you would put that in the bank and you would call it your savings. That's our savings, it's our fund balance. Fund balance, there's a lot of different component pieces to fund balance by law, but basically that is what our fund balance is. We put some of our fund balance in reserves that are specifically for certain things. We have a debt service reserve, which means we can only use that money to pay down on debt. Debt service is just a fancy way of saying the loans we have from our capital projects. So we can't take that money and use it to save jobs. We can't take the money we have in the bank, it's in an unemployment reserve, to save jobs. We have to use it to pay unemployment costs. So there's a lot of rules about fund balance, but one thing I can tell you is we just really don't have much to apply. We've used it in the past, and when it's gone, it's gone. So one of the things that we're also looking towards when we're building our budget, as the superintendent said, is to think about future implications. We do want to start to build our fund balance up. Fund balance sometimes gets a bad rap. People say, well, no, you shouldn't do that. You should be giving that money back to the taxpayer, or you should be cutting something out of the budget that you think should be cut out of the budget. But the truth is, everybody has fund balance. You all want to have some money in your savings account. What happens if you lose your job? What happens if there's sickness in your family? What happens if you just want to go on vacation? You all look to have fund balance or savings. In the school district's case, we look to try to have a little bit of fund balance so that we can use it for emergencies or to offset other costs. So that is one of the things we are looking at, hopefully being able to start very incrementally build back up our fund balance so that we have something to offset other problems that are going to arise in the future. Some of the things that we've already done to reduce cost, as I alluded to earlier, is we participate in the New York 44 Health Insurance Consortium, otherwise known to a lot of folks as Erie One Gosees Trust. So that is where we get all of our health insurance from. And it's very competitive. It's a good place to be. So we're controlling spending by being in the trust. We participate in NYSER, which is the New York State Insurance Reciprocal. It's a consortium of municipalities and school districts, and that is where we purchase all of our liability insurance from. So that is really a very cost-effective way to insure all of our employees and all our assets of the district. The district this year started an energy education program. Some folks might already know about this. We're guaranteed certain savings by implementing a program where we basically teach people how to conserve energy. So it's not just having somebody go around behind everybody else and turn off the lights. It's actually teaching people new habits so that you will learn how to better save energy. There will be some continuation of the process in years to come. We just refinanced our capital improvement bonds from 2002, and we did realize really some significant savings. We're going to be saving in the neighborhood of $50,000 a year. So that's a wonderful thing that we are able to do this year. Much to many of our employees' frustration, we did freeze the expenditure budget very early this year in November as a measure of really trying to see what's in the budget and only buying really what we needed to do our jobs. We still are buying. We buy what the teachers need. But we don't buy anything we don't have to, all in an effort to generate some fund balance this year. We participate again in a cooperative for utility purchasing. So it's the cheapest way you can purchase utilities. Both our gas and electric is purchased in this manner. So we're doing what we can to manage our utility costs. We participate in a workers' compensation consortium. It's a self-funded consortium. Again, it's the cheapest way you can purchase workers' compensation insurance for our employees. We're hopeful, although it's very competitive and a difficult task. Greg Davis did a wonderful job putting together a school district improvement grant. It's worth a lot of money. We're not counting on getting it, but we're certainly hopeful. We will apply for anything that is appropriate and applicable to us in the way of grant proceeds, but you can't budget for it. And there's no way I can put that in the budget as a revenue at this point until we would receive some sort of award notification. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to the superintendent.
Thank you, Barb. At this point, I'd like to take our first break and have some dialogue at the table. And up on the screen, you see what we're looking for. First, what are your impressions or thoughts about the information that has been presented to you this evening so far? What feedback do you have on the slides that have been presented? And what questions do you have on the information that's presented to you? I'd like you to take 5 minutes to talk about this at your table. I'd like you to record the items and have somebody write down. And for this session, please can I have your attention? Please utilize the green sheet of paper for this session. Take 5 minutes and then we'll get some feedback after that. Thank you.
While we don't have time to listen to everything that you've been talking about, we really hope you'll take the opportunity to write things down because, as you can see, we need all the help we can get in education right now, especially with funding and trying to maintain the great program we have here in Hamburg. So if you don't get a chance to speak, please make sure you hand it in on the paper. Is there anyone who wants to go first and share something you talked about at your table?
My name is Mark J. I live at 4784 Crystal Drive in Hamburg. I've met some people tonight at our table who said their kids walk to the elementary school and walk to the high school, but they have to be bused to the middle school. Is there a way that can be eliminated to save money? And also another thing that came up by me is there any other way to raise money legally besides what you've had here? Can you have spaghetti dinner, bake sales, any other thing like that that could raise money in the community? Is it legal to do that?
Just let me take the last one first. Regarding fundraising, school districts are significantly limited in terms of the activities they can engage in to raise funding. The types of situations you described would fall more toward a booster club, a PTSA, or various clubs that are active within the school system. Regarding transportation, that is something under consideration. We are looking at mileage limits. We are also looking at bus runs. We are looking at after-school activities as well. So the transportation is something that is under pretty significant review at this point.
Thank you. Somebody else want to say something?
My name is Martha Kavanaugh, and I teach 8th grade U.S. history at the middle school. And there was a lot of discussion this evening about the tax levy and the amount that needs to be collected with the tax levy, and I would like to get a sense for how that translates into the tax rate. So for example, historically the district, as other districts, I live in Ocean Park, have sent out notices that your tax rate will go up, say, $8 or $10 or $12 per $1,000 of assessed value. And my question is what does that look like at this juncture with respect to tax rates? And additionally, what kind of relationship the district possesses or enjoys with the tax assessor, and how are tax assessments done in the areas related to the Hamburg Central School District.
Okay, I'll start backwards. Each town has their own assessor. We don't assess the property. An assessment is the value of your home that you're going to be taxed on. It's not necessarily your market value. So when you look at your bill, you'll see your assessed value and you'll go, wow, that's not how much my house is worth. And actually that's a good thing, because the higher your assessed value on your tax bill, the higher your tax bill is going to be. So all of the assessors set their own assessed value. That's what their job is, and they provide to me their assessment rolls. Assessment rolls usually don't become finalized and available to the district until at least the end of May, which you can see from a time frame is not particularly helpful when we adopt our budget and vote on it before there is a certified levy. Tax assessors are very hesitant to give out any real numbers until the very last second, but I do have a good relationship with all of them. I've been a tax collector, so I know pretty much all of them personally, and I do try to get them to tell me, so what do you think it's going to look like? But they're very guarded, and I would be like that too if I were them. So I don't like to commit to a particular tax rate at this point because it's really unfair, I think, for everybody, including us. A lot of things go into what your bill will look like. First, you take your levy and you divide it out over all of the towns. Now, some towns are assessed at 100%, and if you look at your bill, your town might be assessed at 63%. So your tax rate per thousand is going to be higher than your neighbor who's assessed at 100 because you're not getting taxed on the full value of your home. Now, who makes those decisions? That's New York State. They make the decisions on your equalization rate based on the information that the assessors give to them. So that's out of the school district's control. And the assessed value of your home is again out of the school district's control. The only thing that's really in our control is the amount of the levy. So the other thing that also impacts your tax bill is STAR. STAR is also set by New York State, and they set the limits on how much of the STAR exemption you're allowed to have. Usually it's the first $30,000 will take off the top of your bill and you're not taxed on that. Does everybody remember when you used to get the check in the mail? Well, they took that away too. This year they capped the amount of STAR assessment savings you could realize at 2% from the preceding year. So all of these things go into how your bill is calculated, and all of them are not calculated by me. So, of course, the school district kind of gets either the blame or the good news of having your tax bill not go up that much or go up way too much. It's difficult with any fairness to tell you right now how much your tax rate per thousand would be. And so therefore, I don't like to speak to it early because it just upsets people. Well, you said way back in March that it was going to be this. It's too bad we don't do business like villages who set their rates based on year-old information from the town. It might be old, but at least you know what it is and you can make that determination. So in school districts, some school districts do like to put out information right around budget time, sharing the good news of what your tax rate is. And it really is an estimate. And they do not know anything more than we know. As a matter of fact, they maybe don't even understand it quite as well as perhaps we might, because having been a tax collector, I know how it really works. So as soon as we feel as though we have a pretty fair estimate of what the assessments are going to be, then it is our obligation to share that with you because that's fair and that's what we would do. But until we have any real information, I'm not in the business of, putting out bad information. I think it's just an injustice to everybody. So I will tell you, as soon as we have some hard numbers on where we think it's going, we certainly will be putting out that information.
How about one or two more? Anybody from the other side of the room? Oh, we got one right here while Colleen goes. Hang on one second with this gentleman.
My name is Clark. Excuse me. My name is Clark Green. I live on South Lake Street. And I'm wondering, it's my understanding that at some point the school district needs to submit the final budget numbers to the Department of Education or somebody at the state. And you are held to that amount for the coming year. Has that been done yet? And is that an accurate assessment of what has to be done?
It's accurate from the tax levy limit standpoint. We were required to submit to the state by March 1st the tax levy limit number that was calculated based on their guidance. That has been done. That is not final, however. So it's not the budget that gets sent to the state. It's the tax levy limit that gets sent to the controller as well as the state education department.
I'm Diane Hannafay. I live at 121 Old Orchard Lane, Orchard Park, right in the Hamburg School District. And I would like to know if we are under contract with the energy consultant of Dallas, and is it true that our district is paying $8,700 a month? And we had a 4-year contract, I believe, that was initiated back in May of 2011. Is this true, and how long will it take the district to see a return on this investment?
Yes, we are under contract with Energy Education. That is a system that's based out of Dallas. Many school districts throughout the country, and in particular New York State, are under that format. I can't tell you exactly, you're close to the numbers, I can't tell you what the exact monthly rate is on that contract. I can find out, we can post that on our website as well. The savings that have been realized so far from that is between July and January, right now is almost $50,000. It's just under $50,000. We expect to see continued savings. It is an area that the savings is guaranteed by contract. So if we don't save the amount that is required to be saved by contract, we will be reimbursed from Energy Education for the amount that we didn't save that was above their estimate. So it's proved well throughout New York State. Many districts are into it. I recently saw, I shouldn't say recently, about 2 to 3 months ago, Hamburg Central School District reported out. I believe they've been in it close to 15 years, if not beyond, and have realized significant savings from a reduced energy consumption based on that program.
Steve, is that 50,000 before or after the expenses, the monthly cost of it?
I'm not following you.
Did you say 50,000 and you still had to pay out the 8,000 a month?
Yes, we still, that's not, we've saved a gross amount of $50,000. We haven't looked at what the net amount is at this point.
I think we have one more.
Hi everyone. I'm sorry. My name is Rachel. Hello. Hi. I'm sorry. That was really obnoxious. My name is Courtney Post. I'm a sophomore at Hamburg High School, and our group has some questions. How much is in the saving funds reserves? And why is extra saving necessary tolerated when taxpayers can't even save money themselves and inadequate funding is available for student programs like athletics and music and teacher employment, like more booster clubs and the benefits for teachers. School employees for healthcare and retirement are more generous than the private sector. Maybe there should be more equalization of benefits. Like, could you give us some specific examples of what you will be cutting?
My apologies, but I didn't follow everything exactly in terms of what you questioned. First of all, in terms of, I caught the last part, and perhaps you can help me out with some of the beginning parts. The retirement system contributions, health insurance contributions, the retirement systems first are mandated from New York State. We don't have an option in terms of participating in the system nor how much we pay into the system. Health insurance is based on a consortium that we participate in that has given us a reduced rate as compared to the community rating that many private corporations have. And as you saw, this year we had an 8.5% increase. We're projecting the same for next year. Typical increases are in double digits, and many of them exceeding 14 to 15% on an annual increase premium pay. I didn't catch some of the other questions. Could you kind of just shout them out to me there? How much is the savings for what? The fund balance? Barbara, I'll let you speak to the fund balance. Just how much money we have in fund balances.
This year, we have about $288,000 in our debt service reserve, which we can only use to expend on loans. We have $24,000 in our unemployment reserve, which we can only use to expend on unemployment costs. We started out with enough money to allocate $1.7 million from the